Hello and welcome back to Town Administrator Update. I'm B News reporter Chris Flaherty, and as usual, we're here with Town Administrator Paul Sagarino to talk about everything going on at Town Hall. Paul, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Chris. Thanks for inviting me over for the session.
No problem. Thanks for being here. So just to start out, we had the town elections back in April. How do you feel things went with the local operations from the town clerk's side?
You can't say enough about Amy and her staff. We get to see firsthand all the effort they put in for weeks leading up to the election to make sure it goes smooth. And as it has since I've worked in town here, we never have a problem with our election staff. They really do a wonderful job. That's a credit to Amy's diligence, hard work, and also the hard work of her staff and the many election workers that we have here in town. They put in a really good effort to make sure that we have a nice, organized, clean election, and they do a spectacular job. So we're really proud of what they do down there.
Absolutely. Now looking ahead to, I guess in a few weeks we have Maytown meeting, and speaking of Amy Warfield, her and Town Moderator Bill Byer were just in front of the select board meeting, and we're going to have town meeting hybrid again this year.
Yes. There was the original intentions were, as the COVID numbers went down, was to have a fully in-person town meeting. As everybody knows, over the past couple of weeks, the COVID numbers started to tick up quite a bit, pretty significantly. And, we did hear from a lot of town meeting members who may have medical issues or immunocompromised, and they just felt that the hybrid option would work much better for them this time. So Amy and Bill, who have done a great job managing town meeting during the COVID era, they made the decision to try to do a hybrid one more time. I think a lot of folks, might want to continue hybrid going forward, but there's also equal amount of people that would just prefer to get back in person and get back to how things used to be. So I think it will be interesting to see what the discussion around that is going forward. But at least for the Maytown meeting, it's going to be a hybrid version.
And the special legislation to have hybrid meetings, is that up in June? Or?
I think it's June or July. And again, so it will require some legislative action to allow us to continue that. As we've seen with virtual meetings, though, there does seem to be a lot of sentiment that that change that we've gone through since COVID to provide that virtual option has been very well received by the public and by some elected boards and officials. So I think that will be interesting to watch, just to see how the state legislature sort of reacts to that change that have come from COVID, that people have actually grown to like some of the virtual components to the meetings. So.
Excellent. Now looking at what's on the agenda for town meeting, we have we don't have time to go through all the articles, but I know we want to hit a few. Article 3 is the approval of the FY23 budget this year. How's the budget look compared to past years?
The budget came out great. As you know, this process starts back in November, where we work together with the elected officials and the Ways and Means Committee to determine budget guidelines, which is essentially a framework for us to develop the budget. We're pretty happy to say that we met all the targets within the budget guidelines that we agreed upon in November. And, quite frankly, the town has been very generous to all town departments in the schools over the years. So we really don't have anything to complain about in terms of the budget process here in Burlington. I think all of our departments are treated extremely well through the process, and the town funds both town and school departments very generously, so we're very grateful.
And I know last year the town received funds from the American Rescue Plan Act. Have we been able to apply any of those?
We set aside minimal amount of that for what's called revenue replacement, and that's sort of to account for the local revenue that we've lost during the pandemic. And for us, particularly here in Burlington, that would be hotel tax. Our hotels are really struggling. That's the part of our local economy that I would say needs the most help getting back up on its feet. So we used a portion of it to sort of maintain revenue in town, and we set aside $1 million just to not touch, to be able to use for the public health emergency. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. We don't know what our Board of Health's needs will be in addressing any sort of pandemic type issues moving forward. So we wanted to make sure that we set aside some funding for that. And aside from that, the board has sort of not issued a lot of ARPA money. We got about $8.5 million total that we have about 5 years to spend. But at around that same time, the town was hit sort of with this PFAS water contamination issue that we jumped very quickly to address. That was a $15 million item to do so. Town meeting very generously supported that. It's very important, obviously, to have the clean drinking water. And
Sure.
so we don't really feel like we're ahead with the ARPA funds at this time. And one of the possible uses for ARPA funds is water infrastructure. So, we might have to be a little bit stingier with that in order to offset that unforeseen expense that PFAS brought to us. So any of the funds that we don't spend of the ARPA funds, we can apply to minimize the debt that we're going to have to take on to make the upgrades at the water plant.
Excellent. And you mentioned revenue from hotels and stuff. Do you think we're going to see an increase in revenue this year as we sort of get back to normal, or?
The town's local economy has been extremely resilient. I don't think I have to tell anybody, if you go to the restaurants, they're very lively. They seem like they're back on their feet. Everybody had a tough couple of years, but meals tax revenue seems to be bouncing back. Excise tax revenue, if you can find a new car, I think there's a lot of folks investing in new cars and things like that. So I do believe that the local economy has fared pretty well, given the difficulties that the pandemic put on our business community. And this is a great place for businesses. We have first-class businesses in town, and I'm not surprised that people are coming back to them in droves to patronize our businesses. We're very grateful to be a center of commerce here in Massachusetts, and we're very happy that our local economy seems to be getting back on its feet. And again, that doesn't take into account, it's been a difficult couple years for all of our businesses, so I don't want to make light of it, but we got great businesses here, and I think that they've gotten back on their feet relatively quickly.
As you said, it's always tough to find a place to eat in town.
Yeah,
too many options. Back to the specifics of the budget. As far as staff and personnel, are any departments looking to restructure?
There's no major restructurings, Chris. What we have been working on recently is succession planning in our departments. There's a real shortage of qualified municipal employees out there in the field for many of our positions. So what we want to try to do is protect ourselves for the future and sort of start developing some of our talent in-house. So probably the big ticket items within the operating budget from the town is the addition of a town accountant. That was part of a 4-year plan in working with a state report where they assessed our capabilities, and that was one of their strong recommendations. We've been able to implement several of those over the past few years. But currently, we have an assistant town administrator, John Denizio, who actually holds 3 full-time jobs. He's an assistant town administrator, a finance director, and a town accountant. So, he does it remarkably, but clearly we could use the bandwidth, and by providing the town with a town accountant, which most towns have, that 3 people doing what John does, and coming down just giving John 2 jobs, I think that will be a huge improvement in terms of what our capabilities are to address what town meeting throws at us, what residents throw at us. So that's one area. In the Public Works Department, I think everybody's aware that John Sanchez's impending retirement in December. So there's not too many people out there that could fill his shoes, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. He wears so many hats, and he has so much expertise in so many different areas. We know that person doesn't exist out there. So what we've done in that department to assist is to sort of reinstate a position that was cut years ago, the operations manager. So by implementing that position, when we do find a new director in December, they'll at least have a fighting chance to try to keep their head above water. So that's what we've done, and those are probably the 2 biggest positions. Within the MIS department, there's a desire from the ISAC committee to focus some more employee time on cybersecurity, and we've made some modest adjustments to that to try to provide more ability for the department heads to be able to focus more of their attention. So we'll be providing some part-time assistance to allow them time to spend more of their efforts on cybersecurity.
Excellent. And are planning and recreation looking to add new positions to their offices?
Yep, recreation, I believe, was an assistant program director, and planning was, I think, a development coordinator position. So, like you might imagine, our departments are extremely busy. This isn't a sleepy town between the residents and the businesses. this is actually, you know, almost more like a city operation. We're very busy, and we deal with a high volume of transactions in just about all of our offices. So,
excellent. And skipping a little ahead to Articles 30, 31, they're from the Assessor's Office, the CPI adjustment, and the Elderly and Disabled Taxation Fund. Can we talk a little about those?
Sure. You know, one of the biggest concerns we have, speaking of the budget, is the impact of our spending decisions on our seniors and other folks who may not have the ability to pay for tax increases. So these two programs are being brought forth by the Board of Assessors and our tax collector, Gary Giannino, working together to try to just provide improvements to the processes where there's relief for either elderly, disabled, and what one of the articles will do will adjust the limitations in order to apply for the program by the CPI annually, so an automatic adjustment. And the hope there is that more people will be able to qualify for the exemptions and abatements. And the second fund is very similar to the scholarship fund checkoff box. It's a voluntary donation that you can make when you're paying your taxes. If you want the funding to go into this special fund, and what it'll do is it'll be available for elderly and disabled people who are dealing with significant financial issues. It will go to a committee. The people will make an application to access those funds to help offset their tax liability in a given year. Awesome. So they do that in other towns already. And, you know, again, it's just hopefully it helps some people. We don't anticipate that it's going to be a blockbuster and solve all of our problems, but at the same time, I mean, it shows efforts to try to address the problem. That when taxes go up, it does have an impact on our residents.
And this would be a one-time thing, wouldn't be something they have to vote on every year?
Correct. By putting those measures in place, the town accepts it. The requirements to apply for the exemption will automatically, your income limitation will go up by the CPI, and your asset limitation will go up by the CPI. And again, that will happen automatically every year, as issued by the state will tell us what the percentage is.
Okay. And last thing I wanted to touch on with town meeting is the Community Preservation Act. I'm sure a lot of people have heard a lot about that lately. Can we just spend a minute on that? What that is, what that entails? Sure.
I think this is the perfect, the article at town meeting will sort of be whether or not to send this to the ballot for the voters to decide. And I think that, you know, most people would agree to let the voters decide on this one. It's a really unbelievable program. I think the committee's done an unbelievable job in terms of educating the residents and all the elected officials and board members as to what it means, how it works. It will allow us to do some great things that we ordinarily may not have the funding to do. On the other hand, it is an additional tax. So, I mean, there are pros and cons to all legislation, and I think we'll be able, you know, I'm curious to see how the voters decide on it. If they provide us with the funds, I think that the CPA committee, when it's formed, will be able to do some great things to benefit the community at large. But again, the other side of me, sometimes I wish we had a special fund dedicated to building schools and police stations as well. So
maybe next year.
Yeah.
So just to wrap things up, summer's coming up. The town hall has been fully open for business for a while. The Parks and Rec, they have a full summer brochure now. As you can see, we're in the schools. There's no mask mandates anymore. Just hopes going forward for the future of morale in the town?
Yeah, I'm extremely optimistic, like I always am, about the town. We're really excited about all the developments that happen with our life science initiative, with all the work that various town boards and committees have done over the past, even pre-pandemic, to prepare us to sort of transition to allow for these life science lab uses in town is really finally coming to fruition. We're really excited. You know, there's a couple big fish coming down to Network Drive with Vericel and the Broad Institute of Harvard and MIT, and in addition to, you know, there's another property in Burlington Woods that leased up with life science companies. So we feel like this is a great place, and that's a great segment of our economy that could be, you know, really a huge part of Burlington's economy. And we feel like we're just at the beginning of this now, and we're really fortunate. And we're looking forward to see how we're able to sort of diversify economy. As you know, we have a lot of retail, we have a lot of office space. The reason we started looking at this was because we were concerned about the future of office space in general, and that was before the pandemic.
Yeah.
So we're looking forward to this. It'll be a key piece to sort of diversify our economy, and hopefully if the weather warms up, we'll all start feeling a little bit more like spring, and I'm extremely excited about the summer, and I'm always excited about the future of Burlington.
Awesome. Well, Paul, I want to thank you for coming in again. Always a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise, Chris. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you all for watching. Until next time, this has been Town Administrator Update.